Anytime you beg another man to set you free, you'll never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourself.
Okay, so I wanted to make a video today about the whole tariff situation that's going on between the US and Canada, the trade war, trying to spin it as.
Canada? Did you say Canada? The American people, Mr. Smiley, would never, ever buy this.
Mr. President, the American people will buy whatever we tell them to. You know that.
I have a lot to say about this in particular, but I don't want to go on a big long rant about it. There's just a couple main things that I really wanted to bring to the attention of Canadians that I don't think most Canadians really know about, because I know that they don't know this. And, I mean, for one, there's a huge chunk of people in Canada who are kind of eager to see us become a 51st state, and I see that as just desperation. There's so many people now that are just desperate. They just want to improve their situation. They see that as an easy out, an easy way to just correct things. It'll improve the housing and job prospects for a lot of young people who are absorbed into the United States. We'd become the 51st state and all that. But Canada is a very unique country in the world in the sense that we actually nationalized our central bank. The Bank of Canada is a publicly controlled entity. We nationalized it in 1938, and I think most people don't understand how significant that is, that we actually own and control our own central bank. We're the only G7 country that owns and controls our own central bank, and if we ever wanted to, we could start spending money into existence again. Instead of borrowing it from banks we allow to create money from nothing, we could control that process ourselves, because we gave that away in 1974 when Justin Trudeau's father was our Prime Minister. He changed the Bank Act to allow fractional reserve lending. And between that period of time and when we nationalized our central bank in 1938, we used our central bank to create the transnational highway, to develop the St. Lawrence waterway. A bunch of national infrastructure projects were completed in this time, and it was actually the most stable time for our currency in the time that we nationalized our central bank, and when we then sold everybody out down the river to those same banks, or to our private banks in 73. Those are the most economically stable years, and we got everything done by just spending our money into existence. And I mean, I was a participant in the Cummer lawsuit because Ann Emmett, one of the people principally behind that lawsuit, she did a great job of explaining the difference between spending money into existence and loaning it into existence, and how the practice of loaning money into existence just guarantees that people have to work for those banks for a huge portion of their lives, because essentially all the money that your government is using to develop your country in different ways is coming from debt that's generated from nothing. So you're not building a hospital for $100 million. The people end up working and performing $100 million in labor to build the hospital, and then they end up paying multiples of that in compound interest. So you look at any infrastructure project in the country. I mean, I'll use Ontario as an example because it's where I'm from. We borrowed a bunch of money, and we had about a $45 billion debt, and it ballooned into like a $300 billion debt in a few years just from compound interest. And the same thing that's happened with the debt that we accumulated during the pandemic. This is going to compound in a few years as well, and we're going to have this enormous mountain of debt that we're probably never going to get out of. And I mean, I met Paul Hellyer. He was the leader of the Canadian bank reformers, and he told me at one of the events I attended where he was speaking that the banking cabal that really runs our country, that controls all of our political parties, are intentionally running up the Canadian debt so that it exceeds the resource wealth of our nation, so that the assets that we control publicly can be sold off for pennies on the dollar with the justification that we need to do that to service our debt. So he was very direct in saying that the government of Ontario, the government of Canada, most of our government has been corrupted by these banks, and that they're on purpose taking out debt to these banks that they do not need to indebt the Canadian public to, so that they can then turn around and steal the resource wealth of Canada. And it's really sad to me to see all these Canadians that are eager to join the US, because we have this incredible opportunity as Canadians to actually lead the pack, to lead the rest of the world, and to show the rest of the world that we can make money ourselves, that we don't need to have this banking mafia controlling our country, that we could take back control of our own lives. Because really, through the issuance of our currency, these people force us to work for them even while they do nothing, and to an extent that amounts to modern day slavery. But everyone is so focused on other things that don't matter, that everyone is so divided amongst all these other things. They use all these different social issues to distract and divide people. And nobody even cares that they're selling their children, or you're setting up your own children to be slaves. The average Canadian doesn't give a fuck that their child will work like a good percentage, like 15% of their life, of their working life, for bankers who created debt from nothing and forced it onto their government. That's a huge percentage of your life to be taken away by fucking criminals in our banking system. And if people actually understood that we actually own our central bank, and that we're choosing to take on debt when we don't have to, pretty much only so that our politicians can force us to work for bankers who have done nothing in exchange for it, these people wouldn't even be safe in our country anymore. And they fucking know it. Which is why people like me, people who participated in the Cummer lawsuit, you're never going to see our social medias blow up. Absolutely fucking not. And this idea that Elon Musk is helping to create free speech, if you believe that, you're fucking part of the problem. You're absolutely part of the problem. He's promoting the accounts that keep you in the fucking matrix, so that you keep thinking that, oh, Donald Trump is making life better. Because all those social issues that were used and created over the years to distract and divide the public, oh, he's going to solve those problems. But he's going to keep enslaving you to imaginary debt. And you're going to be happy because the fucking social issues that you were upset about are a little bit better now. But at the end of the day, they don't give a fuck about those social issues. They just want to be able to keep using all of us as slaves. And we keep going along with it because they bounce us from one terrible idea to the next. But it's a little bit better. It seems like, oh, we're getting bounced around from one team to the next. There'll be these slight improvements, but at the end of the day, you're sliding deeper and deeper into slavery. And your kids are being trapped in debt that they will never escape from. So, I think that the banking cabal would love to see Canada become the 51st state. Because then you don't have a G7 country that actually owns its central bank anymore. Then you've pretty much taken away the number one risk to your banking mafia, really. So I really hope that we don't become the 51st state, even though me personally it would advantage me. It would make the prospects of me finding a home actually possible in North America, which would be great. My wife would really like that. But if they succeed in this, if Canada does capitulate to such an extent that we became the 51st state, that's also what we're losing. And that's way more valuable than buying a home or finding a better job somewhere south of the border. And I don't know. I'm pretty out of touch with the general Canadian population now, I think. Being abroad a few years, I definitely see things in a completely different light than the average Canadian, but I do have faith that if they were to discover the facts that I had early on, that we wouldn't be allowing ourselves to be dragged in this direction. But I don't know. At the same time, I'm somewhat optimistic because people are actually quite pissed off in Canada. And you need people to get pissed off.
You've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value.
Because for too long, especially in Canada, people have been far too complacent. And there's a level of angst, and there's this disgruntled attitude that all the old stock Canadians seem to have now, which that's the prerequisite for change. Now that everyone's pissed off, that's the time to make change happen. So I'd like to make some sort of stunt. I'd like to sort of organize some sort of stunt to get my channel some more publicity. I think the obvious thing for me is to confront any of our politicians, because I'll make them look like a fucking criminal in 2 minutes. Just expose them as people that are selling us down the river for $1. It's really not that hard if you understand what they're doing. Because when you call them out on it, they can't defend themselves against their criminality. When they're called out on it plain as day, I mean, I did it with really kid gloves to Kathleen Wynne, and she just danced around my question. So, if you don't know, she was the Premier of Ontario. It's the largest province in Canada. But I confronted her about enslaving us to these banks. I'll probably drop the link to that other video here. But yeah, that's just check it out. I'd also say if you're Canadian, you want to understand the history of our banking system, there's a great video called "Oh Canada, Our Bought and Sold Out Land." It doesn't have a great production value, but it's fairly old. I think it was made by like a college student. But the quality of the interviews in that documentary are excellent, because they're one-on-one interviews with finance ministers and prime ministers. And he asks some different questions about our financial system. And he asks different people different questions. And then puts the interviews together, edits them together in such a way that from their own mouths they explain to you what they're doing to us. So I'll link to that as well. But I don't know. I've said my piece. I'll leave it at that for the day.